Welcome, everybody.
Hey, hey. Good boy, Tucker.
Work smarter where you want.
This is learning at its most fun.
Honestly, commentary is good because this time we're actually going to take it from not the prospecting, but it's actually the onboarding portion.
Ooh.
So commentary is really useful here
love
because
it.
obviously this is the exciting part. This is the yay, they actually like us.
This is things moving forward.
Yeah. So during this course, we're actually going to talk about, again, we're no longer in that prospecting, but it doesn't mean we're going to stop using all of those tools we mentioned. We're actually still going to use quite a few of them. But this time we have a little bit different in terms of ideas of what we need to focus in on. So it's really building up that contact card that we have, because again, now they're not prospects. We need to update them. We don't want them to reflect incorrectly, but it's also, again, still taking them through that process itself. So we'll say process like 800 times today, because that's really the whole concept. You're going from one step to the next step, to the next step, to the next, until it starts to just become second nature to us. But in here, again, we're going to really focus on that whole client relationship, or making that client relationship, I should say. So we're going to start off really with the basics of basics, only because you'd be surprised how many times we don't even start with this. And then 6 months down the road, we go, did they become a client? Why are they still labeled a prospect? So it's starting off with those contact details. So the very, very first thing is updating that status and category. Now, status is really the highest level that you can actually customize. We're not talking about that type because you can't change that one, but status you can. So every now and then I'll work with offices where they'll just have like prospect and lead, and then they won't have client. And I go, well, how are you identifying who you're actually working with? And they're like, that's a good question. That's why we need you. So make sure you have all of those relationships that we really talked about yesterday. And it's really having those clients, those prospects, those leads, but making sure we actually have the clients so we can label them correctly. Now, category is actually where you get to classify those clients. So think of this as almost like a sub level to status. This is where you can segment that business. So I will say there's no right or wrong definitive answer on how you have to do categories. I've seen the A, AA, AAA, platinum, gold, silver, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. However you do it, make sure you're actually using it. Now, I am going to also shamelessly plug that style guide back into here, because just like Austin had mentioned yesterday, I might define this person as a AA, but Curtis might say, hey, no, they've got a lot more money. I'm putting them as a AAA. So make sure you have that understanding on saying, hey, this is the definition for a single, this is the definition for double, this is the definition for triple, so on and so forth.
Well, and even there's a lot of different ways you can interpret even like the AA, AAA. And I think
Exactly.
we brought this up before. I don't think we brought it up yesterday, but when we do AA, AAA, we essentially have taken that from an office who actually had a word for each A. And so it really meant that's how it determined. Like if we held their accounts, they got at least one A. If they were an advocate, they gave us referrals, they got another A. And then the third one is essentially like we call it attitude, and that can be interpreted a few different ways, but it's essentially like I mean, I see it as people who need a little more extra handholding, a little more care. It's like, who are those people that call, Friday at 4:55, and need that extra little, like, hey, let me reach out. Somebody I need to be a little more proactive with and reach out to. They get another A. So if you get any two of those A's, you're a AA. You get one of them, it really can be sorted in many different ways. And so really what you're saying, like Catherine, is like define it, whether it's by money or it's by how you're reaching out to them. I love that.
Now, Chris, go ahead and actually reference this next one, the client since date.
Ooh,
Why is that so important?
I love the client since date. It's because you need to know, like, when did they actually become a client? Because a lot of the times, like when you change it from prospect to client, you want to know, when did that actually happen? Now, because those statuses are actually customizable, not every single database has decided that they want to have prospect or client. So based off of it being customizable, Redtail, we can't necessarily code and say, hey, they became a client on this day, because client is a customizable field. But if you actually use the field that we have of client since, then it's reportable, then it's searchable. You can say, hey, show me everybody who became a client, who has the status of client right now and became a client in this year or last year or 5 years ago. You can actually use that to your advantage if you're filling out the client since. And that's what's important. If people are becoming clients, you need to mark when that date is.
I'm really glad you brought up that whole concept of searching because you're right. I had an office who wasn't using this field. And so they had no idea when this was coming out because they didn't put any notes. All they did was change the status, and that was it. So really, you're helping your future self more than the current self, really looking into it. Now, there's also some other fields that we should really update as well, like source and referred by. This is actually also coming back to the whole marketing concept that Austin brought up earlier. But date of birth and marital status and marital anniversary, that's to help with that whole client relationship. I know I can probably safely speak for both of us on saying that I have a lot of offices who send out birthday cards or have that even broken down in tiers. If you're the highest tier, you get a phone call. You're the middle tier, you get a birthday card. The lowest, you get an email. No matter what, you're still reaching out to them, but filling out those really kind of important dates to them, it builds that relationship so you're not just another number in the system.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, like we've been saying, every single field in this contact detail section can be put into a search. So
Mhm.
even like Catherine, you mentioned, the source field. That source drop down is supposed to be where are our clients coming from. If not only do I want to see who became a client, but you see like this source says radio lead. Okay, hey, maybe I have a radio ad that's out there. If I'm not tracking that they're coming from that radio lead, then I'm not able to actually run reports. So if I actually say, hey, this contact is a radio lead and I'm putting in that they became a client on this day, I can then run a search and show me every single client who became every single contact who became a client in 2020 with the source of radio lead. And if I run that search and nobody's on it, why am I paying for a radio ad? It's like, hey, I can actually track that information. Is it actually worth me having that source out there anymore? Is it a waste of time? So it's really
Exactly.
beneficial to have that information.
And then the last one, I shouldn't say it's like the last but not least, it's actually very, very useful, servicing and writing advisor. Again, this is a field that sometimes I don't know if we just don't find that value or if we start off as like a one person office and feel like we'll never grow. And then here we are 6 months, a year later, and there's now three other advisors. This really helps define who are your clients. Again, every now and then I'll have an office who doesn't fill this in, and then I'll ask, well, how do you know whose is whose? And they'll go, good luck, good faith, good search and looking over it and trying to remember. This is an easy searchable field to help explain this is my person. So I'm really glad you brought up that whole searching because that is something that's very useful when it comes to clients and really reaching out to them. But those aren't the only fields that have value when it becomes a client. Now, I'm going to talk about keywords first, and then I'm going to pass it off to Curtis to talk about easier to find fields. But keywords are a predefined selection that can be used to group similar contacts. So we kind of like to think of this as an inherent yes or no question. Yes, are a 401k client. No, you're not. So you don't get that keyword. Yes, you are a tax client. Then yes, you get that keyword. So we oftentimes again have offices who have tax clients, investment clients, insurance clients, but want to break it down further into a 401k client, a 403b client. And instead of putting that into that whole status field where you can only have one value, use keywords because you can put as many as you want on there. Now, it's not only limited to services, of course. This is another way to really, again, attach important pieces of information. I had an office who did billing a little bit differently. They had some clients who were billed in advance and some that were billed in arrears. And they had no way of knowing it besides this literal post-it note on their desk where I kind of shivered myself. I'm like, ooh, you can lose that quick, fast, and in a hurry. Put that in on the contact records and say, hey, this person's in advance billing, this one's arrear. You can search off of that. Now, I know another one that Curtis and I both love is holidays. If you send out holiday cards, you can get very specific by saying, hey, this one celebrates Christmas, this one celebrates Hanukkah. Hey, for religious reasons, this one celebrates nothing. You can always decide that with these keywords. Now, if keywords are that inherent yes or no question, inherent yes or no question, I knew what I was talking about there. Curtis, tell me, what are user-defined fields?
Well, user-defined fields are, I mean, just like it says, it's a field defined by the user. So in this case, think of where we have status and category. Status is the field name, category is the field name. The values, like under status, the value is you get to customize that part of it of active, inactive, prospect. Same with category, how we're talking A, AA, AAA, you get to customize that. But a user-defined field lets you create the field name and also how you want to place the value. So if there's a field that doesn't exist in Redtail and you want to report on it, you can actually create your own user-defined field and place it on the contact. So for instance, as an example, preferred meeting type. You know, hey, that's great. Hey, we've started offering Zoom meetings, face-to-face, and also like over the phone. Like you can create a user-defined field called preferred meeting, place it on the contact record. If they say, I prefer a Zoom meeting, you can actually place that as the value. Same thing goes for if you want to track their alma mater or any kind of like personal information, even down to like how they like to take their cup of coffee. Hey, I know that when Curtis comes in, that he prefers a scoop of brown sugar and a little bit of heavy cream. And we're gonna skip out on the lemon zest. How we got those those suggestions today because it affects the cream. You can put that information of, hey, I know how they take their coffee when they come into the office, and I have it ready for them. It's just that little bit of extra touch that if you want to put it, you can actually label that in your CRM. Absolutely love that option.
I agree completely. So before we really move on to the next one, I do want to hop into the database actually and point out that this is going to be something that's under the admin. So if you come up to your name again, come on down to manage your account, scroll all the way to the bottom until you can't scroll anymore. That's when you're going to find that admins only manage database list. So both keywords and user defined fields will be added back here. But again, the bigger difference, you're just adding keywords in here, just typing in that word or phrase that you want versus that user defined field. Like Curtis is saying, you pick how you want it to set up. So that
Now,
preferred meeting type, we only have 3 choices. I can always add more should I add more options, but I don't want to have a free form text saying, hey, I want it all phrased correctly at the same time. It's not going to happen. I promise you there.
and another way I like to put it is keywords are always an implied yes. It's
Mhm.
an answer to a yes or no question where the answer is yes. So, like Catherine said, are they a 401k client? Yes, they get the keyword of 401k. But if it's something where I actually need to know the answer, is it yes versus no? We like to talk about RMDs a little bit. You can create an RMD specific user defined field for whether or not they took their RMD for 2021. Yes or no. I actually need to know. I can't just be an implied yes. I need to actually have the value of no, and that's what makes user-defined fields a little extra special than the keywords themselves. It just gives you more information if you need it.
It's actually a really good call out on that one. So, as far as, well, you've got them built, now what type of scenario? So, I'm going to come back to where we were at earlier, because maybe while I'm prospecting, I learned a couple of things in here. This is down here at the bottom. So, keywords are going to be over to the left of tag groups where we were at earlier. We already added that mailing monthly email, but if I needed to add more, I could do that from here. So if I know that he's going to be a 401k client, I could put that in here. If I know what holidays he already celebrates, because maybe we already talked about that, again, I could put that in here. And then user defined fields on an individual contact right here. So again, if I know how he takes his coffee, and that's one I have in here, I can flat out say, hey, he is an espresso. Oh, I can spell.
There's
There
no
we
X.
go.
There's
Espresso
no X.
with
Espresso.
lemon zest.
Espresso.
This
It's
is why God
espresso.
created
I'm like, you
whatever.
got to
We're gonna
spell
not
that
worry about that.
correctly.
I cannot spell today. Espresso. It's with an S. There we go. Now I deleted the wrong thing. Anyways, don't spell very well, apparently. So espresso with lemon zest. I'm gonna just add that. I'm not gonna worry about it right now. Apparently, I can't spell today. But there's
It's
that
okay.
user defined field. Now, similar to anything else, if you feel like you need to edit it because you can't spell like I can, you need to delete it, you can always do that from here, just like you can edit a keyword. Now, the biggest difference between these two is that keywords, I can come back to that advanced searching that we were at earlier, and I can find everyone who has that particular keyword and search off of that and say, hey, I want to know everyone who does have that 401k client, click run, you're not going to find user defined fields in here. So if you have been looking in here and you're going, clearly losing my mind, are these working? I cannot tell anymore. You are perfectly fine. You're not losing it. User defined fields are reportable. So you're going to want to come to reports, come on down at the bottom. There's that contact user defined field. And similar to what we did earlier, filter is where you're going to want to start with. So again, if I want to know everyone's coffee preference, not just Al's, I can leave that as contains, run that filter, and I'll get everyone's in here. So we get quite a few different options. We'll have to add a couple of the new ones we learned today, but this is again that big major difference between the two.
Now, also on top of that, maybe if, and look, we're going to narrow down and still talk about coffee preference here. You get to choose how the value is placed. We put it's any text. You saw Catherine can type whatever she wants. Maybe you only offer like 4 different types of coffee. Say, hey, like it's not unlimited. We only have 4 ways that, we can actually set it up for you. In that case, you can actually create the field name with a drop down instead. So really there is a difference. You can make every single user defined field free form text where you type out whatever you want. But if the value is a limited number, we highly suggest do the value drop down instead. Because in this regard, if you wanted to search for anybody who likes espresso, but Catherine doesn't know how to spell espresso,
I also just
if
realized I'm missing the R. That's why.
yeah. Now, it's a great example actually. Because of that, we're gonna say that was a planned mistake. For training
Totally.
purposes, it's for training purposes. Is why we can't spell. But if we were to go up and type in the filter and say, I want to find everyone who likes any kind of espresso, actually keep it as and actually spell espresso correctly.
See if I can
Hers
do that
will not.
today.
There's no X.
Is it an S? Was I
It's an
right?
S. Yeah,
Okay,
it's an
I
S.
was right the
Espresso.
first time, and then an X, then I questioned it. So there we go. And I actually put the R. My keyboard did work
There
with
we
me
go.
now.
So now when you apply the filters, the one that we added for Alborn, it's not going to come up because it was spelled incorrectly. So keep in mind the any text, even though it's great to list like very specific details, if you're going to use the reports for it, sometimes a little more difficult because we all type things incorrectly on a regular basis. Like that's just how it goes. Like, but
There we go.
right click and the the spell check in the browsers is my best friend.
Yep. And then sometimes there we go. So that's really what we're pointing out. So then if you do notice that, hey, Catherine in my office can't spell to save her life, let me go fix that. You can go and fix that. And then that way your report is correct. Now, again, those aren't the only 2 things we want to worry about. We want to actually talk about a couple more things when it comes to those clients. So besides getting those client details, besides adding in the actual contact details themselves, we want to talk about those relationships because again, it's usually not just one person. It kind of is like the whole tree branch of other connections that come with it. But there are distinct differences here. So we have 2 kind of options here, and there's family and memberships. So family, I always like to think of the tax definition, immediate family members, head of household, the spouse, and then if I can still claim my children, putting the children in there, or dependents. I shouldn't limit it to children. But again, that's really who we're thinking about with family. One of the biggest things we always get asked about is, well, what do I do with those kids who are over 18, who are also married, and now they're also going to become a client? How do I connect it all? Well, you want to actually break them out of the family first because you can only belong to one family at a time. And if that child's now married, if I didn't break them out of the family, I can never add in their spouse. I can't add it in if they have any children. So think again that tax definition. Now, Curtis, what's memberships then?
And memberships, like this is a sort of a reiteration of what we went over yesterday, but memberships is everything else. Family tax definition, memberships, any other kind of possible relationship you can think of. So if you do want to list an ex-spouse or children that are grown up and their own clients, trust accounts. There's so many different options. Even if you want to mark, who their roommate is. If you have 2 clients that live together but aren't actually the same household, you can link them together still in memberships in any kind of way that you want. I love memberships for that because you actually get a visual representation of how your client is linked to everyone else.
Exactly. I even saw recently someone had to keep track of board memberships. So specifically, they had to keep literally every single one, which was new to me, but it was extremely important to them, which brings up something really important with memberships, and that is you can add more to it. So should you again be looking at your own database going, well, I don't have 401k provider and participant. How do I get that one? You can add it to that managed database list. So I'm going to come back. I know I kind of glitched my page here. So let me come on back. Actually, I'm just going to stay on Al here. So family is at the top here. Now, similar to, I believe, what we mentioned yesterday, just because they're single doesn't mean they don't belong to a family. It's just a family of me, myself, and I, which that's nothing's wrong with that. So if you come into it, but they do happen to get married, you can always add that spouse later on, add that dependent. You can always edit the family name. So right now we have it as Mr. Albert E. Borland, but if it becomes the Borland family, you can always edit that. And then memberships is going to be on the left. So when you click on that more, memberships are going to be here. Now, again, remember with the employer, it's automatically going to connect right here. So we have that employee-employer relationship. Should that ever change, it'll update for you again from there. But again, you could add whoever else you're important to. So I do kind of sometimes reference this as, if desired, the ancestry.com of relationships, if that is something that, again, is important to you. But again,
I'm on my 23andMe, I still get emails of like, you have an eighth cousin. I'm like,
cool.
hey, that's great.
I hope you start
List
coming
is
in here
there.
adding them.
If you want to create those type of linkings, you can. But again, like Catherine, let's talk about this with those relationships. It's always, there's two sides to every relationship. Like in regards to like us, like I would say Catherine Beltran is my best friend. You know, we're besties. We talk every single day. Whereas she would say that I am her workplace proximity associate. Is that
From a
correct?
distance.
From a
Yeah.
distance. Okay, like
Yep.
there's two different sides of the relationship. You can mark that in memberships. I think she's my best friend. She wants me to stay away from her. Definitely fine.
But that's actually, you bring up a good point here. So yesterday we did have someone who said, hey, why am I not seeing any options here? Make sure you do actually have that other kind of road. I should say you're building a two-way road here. So if I am trying to add in that maybe, hey, Tim Taylor's not only a coworker, but he does view him as that best friend, then you could do it. But again, the link contact is going to refer to here. If Al's considered something else, you could pick something else. So don't feel like you have to pick the same value just because one person views it that way. And I'll
now,
just go ahead and add that though.
now those value drop downs will also change depending on the contact type that you're linking to. So for instance, Al Borland is an individual type contact record. If I were going to link him with a business like Redtail Technology, I don't have the same options as I do for linking him to Tim Taylor, who's another individual. I can't say that Redtail Technology is the parent of Al Borland. I mean, you could technically go and add that to your list, but that's not a thing. But so again, keep in mind your list will be different depending on the type of contact you're going to be linking from the main contact itself.
Exactly. All right, let's go ahead. Let's come on back though. And we're going to move forward with our next topic, which is again something that we really enforced yesterday with the building, which we're not going to do today. We're not going to build it. I think we did that enough yesterday, but it's to reiterate workflows and the use of them with client onboarding. Now, I did want to take a minor step back though, because with yesterday, it was multi-stepped. There was multiple tasks throughout it. You had to go certain ways. You could hop over it. Workflows don't have to actually be that complicated. And I think that's the biggest kind of drawback sometimes with people not wanting to start with workflows, because they always assume it's this, big monstrous task that we have to set up when it could be very straightforward. So the example I always like to start with is one that's just asking for important information. Hey, I add a new contact in. I want to make sure they have an email, a phone number, a contact address, a date of birth, and that's it. I can make a workflow with it just being more of a checklist. And that's still a workflow. So don't feel like workflows have to be overly complicated. It can be as simple and straightforward as this one. Now, while I was kind of going through here, and this is to kind of represent my chicken scratch, which my handwriting does look a lot like this. So I did stop and wonder though. I always think phone number and email addresses and phone number and like all of that date of birth, that's the most important. But I'm also very curious, what are some tasks that your office needs to complete for onboarding a new client? So I am generally asking, put this into your chat. What are some of those tasks that you might feel get forgotten in your office that you wish could be part of a workflow? Or what are some offices that you know, hey, we have to do whenever we add in a new client? So pop that into the chat. I'm very curious because I'm going to show you how simple it can be to add those into our workflow. So don't be shy. There's no wrong answer. It's really how your office handles onboarding. So what are some tasks we have out there?
Well, Catherine, just to be clear, you say
Mhm.
there's no wrong answers, but there are in fact 7 wrong answers, and I will list them now. No, I'm kidding. There really are no wrong answers.
You know, someone just panicked out there. They were
Yeah.
typing like, wait, what? So it looks like we've got driver's license. I have heard that one before. Making the client folder, preferred contact method. I haven't heard that one in a long time, actually. Photo ID, professionals. Okay, so I really like this. So I'm actually going to hop into the database here because I have that important information. So I'm going to come up to my name again, or Tucker's name, manage your account, come back to that workflow templates. Now I'm going to hop into this one because again, it's just that checklist. I know I have driver's license in here. I actually even had someone say, hey, upload previous tax returns. So let's see here. What else do we have? We had preferred method, trusted contact. So let me add those in here. So I'll add in another task.
Now, what I love about this workflow is we get the question every once in a while is when I add a contact record, can I make certain fields required? Like right now, when you add a contact, the only thing required is the name. You can add a contact record with just a name and nothing else. But there's offices who say, I want to make certain things required. Now, there's not a way to make it required, but with workflows, you can actually make a task appear. So anytime I add a contact or change something, with this workflow can be automated to start is going to say get the driver's license, get, upload their tax form, anything you want to make required yourself where there's an actual actionable item. Workflow is the best way to do that.
I'm going to add just one more here because again, the whole point of this is to show that you can make it super simple like this and it'll still be just as effective. It's just kind of acting again as that reminder. All right, so it looks like I've got about 12 different tasks here. I can always add in more descriptions. I can always change who it's for again. But really, again, the whole purpose is to help us make this as streamlined as possible when we add in that new contact. Now, I'm going to kind of contradict myself for just a second here and say that, well, if you need it to be more complicated, you can. So
Ooh.
instead of just leaving it as that one simple checklist, you can actually still just kind of expand on that checklist. So it's still the same first part, but this time you're involving more of an actual meeting itself and then the follow up to that meeting. So it's almost taking into comparison what we briefly described as that client review. And again, I know this is a little hard. It's supposed to look like my chicken scratch, which that is hard. So when we come back to workflows, I'm going to come up to the name just as a reminder, manage your account, come on over to workflow templates. And then it's actually towards the bottom here that we had this one. We have it as the onboarding workflow option. This is really what it would look like. So again, it's very similar to what we just did, except for this time we have it as before target date, because maybe I'm gathering this information before they come in. And then actually having the meeting itself with more of that paperwork assembled, going through my proposal, all that good stuff. Hey, sign this, sign your life away, all that good portion. And then following up with it with anything I need to maybe file, maybe I need to scan over for their own copies. So it is, again, just expanding it from there. Now, one thing that I always like to point out too is that should we maybe not have some of these items in here, it doesn't mean you can't add it on the day of. Maybe we needed a copy of something and we obviously are going to get it when we meet with them. Feel free to add more tasks. Again, you're not stuck with what we show here. You're adapting it to your own office.
And
So
it really comes down to like what is most important. Like
Mhm,
we've given 2 examples of the same workflow almost. It's,
mhm.
hey, when I add a contact or I make them a client, I have a list of items I need to get. Is that all I need for my onboarding process? If so, that's great. You can even add a task on there to schedule a meeting.
Mhm.
And then the second option is about it being actually off the meeting itself.
Right.
So if I say, like Catherine said, do I need to get all these tasks done 5 days before the meeting? Or do I need to get them done 5 days after I add them as a contact? It really is dependent on what is your process, and then take that and then choose the workflow that's going to best fit you and build that into the system. Again, this is all based off of the current process you already do. You can do it either way. Honestly,
Exactly.
I would even say you can split this into two workflows. The
Yeah,
first one being just the basic checklist of, hey, I add them into the database as a prospect or make them become a client. I go through, I check off all these items. Then when I reach out to them and schedule the meeting, then I start another workflow to do other kind of prep work. There's so many different options in how you can build this out that it really comes down to why whiteboarding out your process to find out what's most important to you really does matter.
exactly. Now, I don't know about you, but as much as I love the whole quick add option, there is still a way we can make it easier, which is bringing back that whole concept of automation. And just like there's technically two options with this one, there's really two options with automations here as well. So the first one is more of that status change. So taking it from prospect to a client at that point, that's that transition. This time, though, you can have that reaction to link just that basic workflow, that important information. 5 days after they changed into a client, I want to make sure they have that email, phone number, driver's license, photo ID, whatever else I might have just been missing there. But again, you want to make sure you limit it with those conditions. So we do have time. We're going to hop in and actually build this one because yesterday we built it off of a contact added. We didn't build anything with a status changed. So I'm going to hop in. I'm going to have kind of Curtis walk me through it a little bit here. I'm going to get us there first. We'll come up to our name, manage your account, come on down to automation templates, and we're going to build that whole status changed one. So I'm going to come over to add. And while I'm talking, I'll have Curtis just kind of explain everything again.
So
So,
in this case, we are building an automation which is going to bridge the gap between actually changing the status to client and starting our workflow to make sure we have that checklist of items that we need to add to their contact record. So again, you would first create the workflow, then come in here and build an automation similar to what Catherine's doing right now. We're just going to name this prospect to client, straightforward, so we know exactly what the automation is for. And the trigger event, one of the most important things, the contact status change. So that's the actual item or the actual action that you need to do in the red tails. You need to change the status for a contact record in order for it to start off. So if you're not doing a trigger event where you're physically making a change to the database, it's not going to work here. Once we choose on the event, Catherine tabbed over to do this action. You can say, okay, if I change a status, what do I want to happen? We're focusing on workflows right now. So we're going to say link a workflow from an active template. And it gives us a drop down of all of those templates we have. Again, it needs to be an active template. We're choosing that we want the important information workflow to start.
now I can go ahead and just go forward with this, right?
You could. Technically, this is an automation. But what this says right now is anytime I change a status, it's going to link the audit that workflow. Now, maybe I only change statuses to client, nothing else. But that means if I change it from client to inactive client, that's also a status change. And that's going to start my important information list again, which isn't correct. So we have the conditions to actually jump in and say, I only need this workflow to start when the status is changed to, and we can put client. So anytime I change the status to active client, then this workflow will go. Conditions technically are optional, but when you don't have conditions, then it's just too general, and it just means every time I change a status, it's going to go, and I don't want that. Only for my clients, because maybe I have a different workflow that's going to start when I change a status to inactive. You can build one for every single status change that you have.
Exactly. Now, if I wanted that one to be actually at the top here, I could technically have come in here. I'm going to edit this actually just to make it even easier on me. Update that list, and it's actually going to go ahead and just refresh it to plate save, moves it to the top. Now, this one was maybe an older one we had. Maybe I need to fix that because maybe that's that email notification that I want it to happen. I'm going to make that inactive though to double check it and make sure I don't have maybe multiple things that are happening, or always feel free to do that. But I have now that one is active. And again, that will link my actual important information. So if I come back over to Al, who's currently listed as a prospect. Oh, nope, he's already gotten changed. Looks like someone else went to the database here. So let me,
We can change it back to
yeah,
prospect.
we'll kind of reverse it. We're going to go blast in the past for a second, prospect back for a second. Now I'm going to go ahead, just refresh, make sure that held. All right, let me come back in here now. I'm going to change him to an actual active client, update contact details, give it a second, refresh my page. There's that status. More importantly, now at the top, there's that one, which is that important information that we were just talking about. So again, you're not limited with those automations to just when a contact's added for prospecting, but you can also carry that automation through with the client onboarding from when they are now labeled as a client. So this is again with that status changed. Now, we did have that other more, I don't want to call it complicated, but more in-depth workflow that revolved around an activity getting added. So that's another automation that actually could trigger. This one just being an activity added, linking it up to again trigger a different workflow. But again, you want to make sure that you really use that typing category. So let's come on back. I want to say we have this one built, so we'll just kind of go through it. We just double check, and if not, we'll build it from scratch. But let's see. I believe this is the one I'm looking for.
Yes.
You got it. Yep, this is the one.
So real fast, Catherine, we had a question come in and I wanted to answer this live is, in a workflow, can you have one workflow trigger another workflow to start? And the answer is no, but it doesn't mean you can't have things still automatically happen. You want to think about the trigger event. So in the case of in workflow example 1, where it's just a checklist of information, if I say, hey, as soon as this is done, I want my next onboarding workflow that's based around their meeting to start. Well, in that case, I would add a task to workflow 1 that says schedule meeting. And it's the addition of an activity that can actually start the next workflow. So keep in mind, we don't necessarily want to say, hey, this workflow will start the next workflow. It's this workflow ends, and one of the actions that it tells me to do, like adding an activity, is what's going to start the next workflow. So we always want to take a step back when we want workflows to link to each other and think about what are we actually doing or changing in the database that can help me push it forward.
There we go. So I just added it. Again, as simple as that, you schedule it if, again, that's something you'd want. Now, coming back through this one, though, this is actually tying exactly what Curtis is talking about with that activity getting added. Now, that is one thing I really want to stress. I'm emphasizing that word added here, because if you change it, it will not trigger that workflow. If you've updated it and you realized, whoops, I picked the wrong type, it will not trigger that workflow. So it's going off of you originally adding in that actual activity. So once that activity is added, it's going to link that workflow. So again, very similar to the last one. This time, however, we've just made it extremely specific by saying that if that activity type is equal to appointment, and then if that category is equal to onboarding meeting, that's when we want it to apply. So with this one, we again have two conditions that must be met. That's something we chose to do. We are not required to have a multifaceted option here. You could just have maybe the type if you'd prefer, but this is actually what we would want to trigger. Now,
Real fast, on that same topic, Catherine, keep in mind our activity types and our activity categories are most likely different than what you have in your database because they are customizable fields. If you happen to have onboarding meeting as a type, definitely add that as your condition. Where we have client review and client meeting in there, but we don't have onboarding meeting. We have that as a category. It all comes down to, again, how you've decided to organize your activities. And that's what's most important here is even in this case, if the category is onboarding meeting, that can be the only option. We can actually just say, hey, it's just one level of activity category is equal to onboarding. It doesn't matter what the activity type is. I'm just more concerned about the category. Personally, I would say use as little conditions as possible. Minimum of one. You would need to at least have one condition, but if the least you can use, the better it is for consistency. Because if Catherine were to add this as a task with the category of onboarding meeting, how it currently exists will not start the automation because it's a task, not an appointment. So if we remove that layer of, hey, it's needed to be the type, and we're only concerned about the category, it's going to be easier because we know that, hey, the category was correct. We don't have to worry about the type if we accidentally chose the wrong one.
Now, there is one tool though. So, to avoid maybe those accidentals, because I get it, we're human, we're bound to just move too quickly sometimes and go, insert choice words here, because it's always going to be when it's the worst day for it to happen. But if I did exactly what Curtis is saying here, where I only picked onboarding meeting, I think everything's going rainbow and sunshines. I attach it to Al, I'm going through it. Yay, onboarding meeting, filling it in, picked the date and time, click create activity. This automation will not work because, again, that type has not been chosen. However, I do have probably my absolute favorite thing in the entire system, which is, I almost feel like I need a drum roll here, activity templates. Activity templates are seriously one of my favorite things because it simplifies a lot of what we're looking for. I have so many offices describing exactly what Curtis is saying, where one person in our office always fails to pick the right type. So we're never getting those workflow launches. And usually they'll throw the person's name under the bus. Now, I don't want to pick on any offices in particular, but an activity template can ensure that your type and your category, if both of them are listed in that automation, are in fact picked. So again, the whole purpose of this activity template, you pick that template, it's to pre-fill as much of this as possible. So coming back over into the database, if I have that appointment and onboarding in here, I can come back to the name, back to manage your account. Activity templates are right up here. And I will assure you, these are far easier to build than workflows. You can click on new and you're going to pick exactly what you want to be chosen every time you use this template. So again, I'll go for it. I'm sorry.
Oh, I absolutely love activity templates because again, it's for consistency. Every time I create an onboarding meeting, I'm selecting the onboarding template to pre-fill out the things, because then you can say, hey, we need to make sure that this is the correct type and category, and the template's going to fill that out for us. So if you tell everyone in your office, use these templates to make sure that we are going to be consistent with everything, and then the dominoes that you've set up, and that's what I like to describe this as, is the automation, the workflow, the tasks, everything is just a bunch of dominoes set up. And as you knock over the first domino, they're going to go over exactly how you want. That's what the templates are ensuring, that you are correctly and accurately knocking over the first domino.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and let's see. Let me see if I can get someone else here. Actually, not. Let me just do a quick little search. Let's kind of enforce that search really fast. Let me find another prospect.
Now, real fast, actually, because I saw this question come up.
Yeah, go for it.
Someone said, I wish an automation could be triggered when you are adding a follow-up activity from a note. And it definitely can. Because when you actually check, when you are making a note and check create follow-up activity, you can actually choose a template that activity is going to be created with. And if that template has the activity type and activity category selected for something that will start your automation, then that's exactly what it's going to do. So you can definitely use the follow-up activity as the trigger activity for your automation to start your workflow.
Sorry, it's like, let me get there really fast. So I found another prospect in ours. And so they, again, recently, we're going to make them a client. Now I know I have another one triggering, which might, again, just be that simple, important information. Let me switch them. I'm going to just make a single A for the moment. But this time I've gone ahead and I've scheduled that activity. So I'm going to come over to this add activity or the plus sign at the top, either or. It's not to say one's better than the other. But I'm going to go ahead and pick that onboarding meeting template. Again, it pre-filled my subject, my type, my category, my attendees even. So now all I'm doing, changing the date. I'm going to say she's coming in earlier, 10 a.m. time. I'm going to create my activity. There's that meeting. Went ahead, switched chart status. So we actually have both of those triggered now. There's that important information and there's my onboarding.
Now,
So go for it.
Oh, Catherine, go into that meeting too. Like go back to the main contact and click on the meeting you just created. Like when you open up the meeting, up at the top in the yellow, you'll see it's actually linked to the workflow. The automation will actually put this link inside the activity so you know exactly what workflow it's tied to. And I love that aspect of it as well.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because this is another thing I love with automations, with activities specifically. is that if you come across someone, because there's always at least one person that we have who notoriously reschedules and just reschedules and keeps rescheduling on you. And if you didn't have that automation linking up, you'd have to change that target date in two different spots. One would actually be within the activity. If it's again not having that automation to trigger this workflow, I'd have to also come in here and change the target date. But if Tina immediately calls me back right after and goes, I'm so sorry, I forgot I'm going to be unavailable that day. Can I come in on Thursday instead? I just changed the 8th on this activity, save my activity. Now I had this one open, so I'm going to just refresh really fast, but it changed the 8th automatically for me. So I love linking an activity or creating an activity template that ensures my automation is going to work to link my workflow. It just takes all that guesswork out. Like Curtis was saying earlier, you're not having to sit there and go, is this going to work? Am I going to have to make sure it's automatically working every time? You know, you're taking out any of those questions that we might be putting on our coworkers. So really, you are not limited, I should say. You're not limited when it comes to those activity templates. You're not limited really when it comes to automations and workflows, but activity is really that appointment. Workflow is that process that you're going through it and making sure that, hey, we prepped, we did the meeting, we did a follow-up. But again, that appointment is the activity. I know I saw that somewhere in the chat, I think. So again, the big thing is appointment, activity, workflow, the whole process around it.
Now, Catherine, I want to show off the how to handle page on this, just because we've been showing two sides to like different processes. Like, hey, you can do it this way, or you can do it this way, and we've been going back and forth. And personally, I understand like that's a lot of information showing me two different sides to how it can be done. Just so, we pointed this out yesterday, but if you go to the question mark in the top right, then go to the Redtail help desk. It'll open up. And so what I suggest is it's documentation. So it's not a video. We go to where it says Redtail CRM. That's going to give us a lot of documentation information. When you scroll down, there's that section called how to handle. When you open that up, this is all of Redtail's best practices. And go ahead and click on the onboarding one, Catherine, where it says client onboarding. And I just want to show, if you want to know what the steps are step by step, for what we just did, it's all here. We talk about the status and category. We talk about creating the activity. Even scrolling down here, it's going to show you the workflow and the automation about how those go together. So again, the information is all there. If you want to see what are the step-by-step instructions without having to, listen to Curtis's horrible jokes in the video again, it's definitely here where you can definitely go look at it.
And then similarly, just because again, we reference it so much, besides just the how to handles, we've referenced 3 templates here alone: the activity templates, the automation templates, and the workflow templates. And if you're sitting there going, I don't even know where to begin, you've got that kind of glazed over, oh, this is a lot. There's sample templates on here as well. So it's also under that how to handle. I just do a quick search because it's always the first one that pops open. But this might be also a really good source to just start and get some ideas, and then use that whiteboard you might have purchased, or maybe cave and go into the post-it notes, whatever works best for you. But that way you can start to have that process. Again, once you have that process, that's when consistency, organization, and just an all-around easier time will be used within the CRM.
And
Uh,
sorry,
no,
don't
go for it.
ever feel like you have to use every single template, every
Right.
single option of templates we have. I see people get buried in so much information and lost, a little bit because they're trying to use every single template that's available. It is possible to use them. We show a world where we are using all of them, but keep in mind, not every office has a process to where it's going to work out in that way. And so add them little by little, saying, okay, hey, let's take on activity and note templates right now. Let's get the consistency going there. Then let's throw in workflows and then maybe automations.
You got it.
Don't ever feel like you have to do all of them at the same time.
Yeah, I'm really glad. So that whole digestible chunks, I know it's a weird kind of awkward phrase to really absorb, but that is really what we're saying, is work at the pace that works best for you to develop that way to make it easier for you.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 888-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.